Sometimes critics are hard on a film, and rightfully so. Sometimes, though, they're so wrong that all one can do is turn up their microphones and scream into the ether just how wrong those critics are. It's time for a little bangarang and to tell those paramecium-brained know-it-alls that 1991's Hook is not that bad. Welcome one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades in B movies. And when I say that we are fighting the good fight today, I mean it, because some movies, you sit there and you look at the critic score and go, how the hell does this film qualify? And today is one of those cases, because we are talking about 1991's Hook. And returning to the show to help me defend this like the pirates that we are, Greg from Movie Date Night is back. Greg, welcome back to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing bangarang today, Jason. Thanks for asking.
I have a feeling we're going to be saying bangarang a lot tonight.
Start your drinking games now, folks. We're already up to 3.
Oh my God. If we do a bangarang drinking game out of this episode, we may kill the audience.
I'm playing along. I got my rum right here. It's a pirate movie.
Exactly. So now, obviously, we know that this movie is so iconic. It's heralded as one of those timeless 90s films. So I'm going to ask you, when you saw that this film qualified, exactly how loud did you scream at your computer screen?
Okay, so here's what happened. I was actually kind of looking for an excuse to come back on the show, because I like spending my time here with you. I enjoy our conversations about the movies. I'm like, I want to do another one. Like, but what can I do? So I was like purposefully going through Rotten Tomatoes, just like the low film score. Like I put on a filter of like, show me stuff that's like below 35%. And I was like, okay, there's this movie, there's that movie. And as soon as I saw Hook was at like 29%, I stood up from the couch. I said out loud in front of my 1-year-old son, shut the F up. Not to him, obviously, but like I said it. And I was like, no, this is 1,000%. No, this justice cannot stand. This has to be reconciled immediately. And I went like the deepest dive, just going through all of like the negative reviews, trying to understand why. And I will say this before we get into our conversation today. During my rewatch of this film, I did everything I could to put on the lens, like the artificial lens of pretend this movie's awful. Look at this as if this is the most boring, garbage piece of film ever. And I started taking some notes as if it's a bad movie, going like, oh, this is a stupid thing. How dare they have cross-dressing in this movie with the little kids on stage, stuff. But after 5 minutes, I stopped taking notes because I was just enjoying the movie so much.
and that's the thing, too. Like, I have never met a single person in my entire existence since this movie has come out that has ever had a bad thing to say about this film. It does. It baffles me how this film got to this point. And we're going to figure that out. But before we do, it is time to take this Spielberg, dare I say, masterpiece. He might not actually say that, but I'll say it for him. Masterpiece of the 90s.
Oh, no, I fully second that. I'm going to get into it. But yes, masterpiece is the correct title here. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Right. But we're going to take it and we're going to trailerize it.
Kidnapping, child endangerment, starvation so bad you begin to hallucinate, violence, and a blood feud leading to war. All the hallmarks of a Spielberg family film. Robin Williams is the boy who never grew up, but now he's all grown up in Hook. He's checked his green tights at the door and settled down with the granddaughter of Wendy, even though he was supposedly unable to love. How's that for an it's not you, it's me situation? He has to remember how to chill so he can rescue his kids from Captain Hook. It was a film that would set a trend for the decades to come, where live-action Disney movies made from animated source material would get dunked on harder than a skateboarding lost boy. It's Hook. Rated PG for pirate gaslighting.
Bangarang, Jason!
Oh my god! Yeah, there's a lot to take in this film here because it's one of those films where you look back at movies like this and The Goonies and Stand By Me, and while Stand By Me not necessarily a kids film, but it's one of those things where you had a lot of darker subject matter in. I mean, Dark Crystal, right? Mm-hmm. Like you actually had more deeper films that were still aimed at kids than you have today. It's a little bit of a fluff today, but you had those kind of films back in the 90s and the early 80s. So this is one of those films, but let's get into who's in this. This film stars Robin Williams, Julia Roberts, Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins, Carolyn Goodall, Maggie Smith, Charlie Cosmo, Amber Scott, and Dante Bosco. But the list of cameos is insane in this film because you also have Phil Collins, Gwyneth Paltrow, David Crosby, Glenn Close, Carrie Fisher, and George Lucas, all with cameos in this film. Some of them you have to find out, you have to actually do the research to realize that that's them, because I did. And it's like, oh dear God, that's awesome. However, there is an almost starring list on this one, and it's a long one. So let's get to this one here. In the role of Captain Hook, David Bowie apparently turned the role down.
No.
And
sorry.
I mean, I could see it. It wouldn't be as good, but I could see it. But apparently also under consideration were Christopher Lloyd and Donald Sutherland.
I can see Donald Sutherland doing this, yes. But I don't see Christopher Lloyd, and I definitely don't see David Bowie doing this, because I think maybe David Bowie from Labyrinth as the Goblin King is kind of blocking that vision of him being in the red jacket and the black wig here. But I don't see that. And I mean, we can get into it now. I mean, Peter Pan for me has always been like a really meaningful story, and like it's pretty deep with its like metaphors. And Captain Hook is like, especially in the original Disney version, like if you go back and watch the animated one, he is literally the mental stand-in for Wendy's father. So to have someone as drastically different from Robin Williams as David Bowie, that doesn't feel right. That feels too dissimilar. So, no. I mean, Donald Sutherland, I can see, but not David Bowie for sure. Yeah.
Although knowing that Labyrinth is out there, you can see why David Bowie would actually be considered for the role, but I think they chose right. In the role of Peter, apparently originally set to play Peter, was Kevin Kline, but he had to drop out because of reshoots for Soap Dish, but they also had Tom Hanks under consideration for this one.
I'm trying to picture Tom Hanks. Like, I'm picturing him from like Big, from like The Man with One Red Shoe. I think he could have maybe done it because he kind of, especially his earlier stuff, he did kind of have that like eternal, like jovial kind of grown kid persona. But I think the problem there is then you don't get the same Peter Banning we have in this movie where like his inner child is dead and needs to be resurrected.
Yeah, I mean, I can see Tom Hanks as the youthfully rejuvenated Peter. I could see Kevin Kline in the Peter Banning side of things.
Exactly.
But you get Robin Williams and you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's like the whole Batman Bruce Wayne casting.
Oh, exactly. Under consideration for the role of Tinkerbell, how's this for a list? Winona Ryder, Rebecca De Mornay, Sherilyn Fenn, and Samantha Mathis.
I like Samantha Mathis for that, actually, but I don't know, what was she doing around this time? Because I know what she's more like in like the kind of 2000s, but, so I'd have to kind of compare that, but I definitely like her for the role. In my opinion, and this might be a hot take, even though I do love Julia Roberts in this role, I do feel like she's the furthest from the MVP for me. Like, I think she does a good job, but I think they could have got somebody better.
Yeah, and 91 Winona Ryder would actually be, I think, a really, really good choice for that as well.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, Julia Roberts did a very good job, and we'll get to that because, of course, there were some extenuating circumstances in her life at that time, but we'll get to that point. Mm-hmm. Under consideration for the role of Shmi were Danny DeVito and Joe Pesci.
Sorry, I'm just picturing a Joe Pesci version of Smee, just essentially like doing this back to back with Home Alone and just doing nothing but fridge and freaks everywhere. He's like stumbling and bumbling around the ship.
Yeah, but the thing is, Pesci is quite good when it comes to comedic timing. Yeah, I think he could have pulled off the physicality of it. I think, but again, you have a really, really good cast in this, and Bob Hoskins, there was just something about him. But we'll get into the deep dives here. Apparently, asked to play Toodles was Sir Richard Attenborough, but he was directing Chaplin at the time, so he obviously couldn't step in and do the role. Clive Dunn was also considered, but yeah, Sir Richard Attenborough as Toodles would have been classic. Brenda Frickner was apparently originally announced as Granny Wendy, but then it ended up being Maggie Smith. The film is directed by Steven Spielberg and was originally intended, back in 1983. This is when the genesis of this film was starting. Apparently, the original idea for this film was for this to be a musical for Michael Jackson. And that didn't happen.
Mean, he did name his compound Neverland Ranch. So, yeah.
Right. Now, apparently, and again, this is all in research. Now, we're not people behind the scenes. We have zero insider information. We go to the school of Google. But apparently, according to, different articles, the fact that the musical for Michael Jackson of this never happened, and even though Spielberg didn't say it was a for sure thing, apparently this kind of soured the friendship between the two. I can only imagine what a 1980s hook Michael Jackson musical would have looked like and what kind of fever dream that would induce into the viewers.
I mean, did you ever see Captain EO? I'm imagining it's probably going to be along those lines.
Probably something like that. Something between that and The Wiz. However, accolades for this film. At the 1992 Academy Awards, it was nominated for Best Art and Set Direction, Costume Design, Visual Effects, Makeup, and Music. At the Grammys that year, John Williams was nominated for Best Instrumental Composition written for a movie or TV. They lost to Beauty and the Beast.
That's you're not going to beat the heavyweight champion. Yeah,
oh dear God, no. If Disney puts out a movie in the 90s with music in it, it's going to win the everything.
Well, also Beauty and the Beast, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the first animated film to win an Oscar for Best Picture, or at least something up there like that. So Beauty and the Beast was a powerhouse beyond belief, and it was just sweeping everything. So yeah, the fact that it even had a chance against Beauty and the Beast is something.
And one of those rare occasions where an animated Disney film that was later made into a live action remake, people still like the live action remake as well. Mm-hmm. So, kudos to them for that. At the Young Artist Awards, Amber Scott, who played the young daughter of Peter, was nominated for Best Young Actress Under 10. She lost to Nancy Moore Atchison for Fried Green Tomatoes.
That's fair. Mm-hmm. That was a great performance. So.
Charlie Cosmo and Dante Bosco were nominated for Best Young Co-Star. They lost to Jimmy Workman for The Addams Family.
Who was Jimmy Was he Pugsley?
He was Pugsley, yeah.
No, sorry, I gave that to Rufio. Rufio.
And Rashawn Hammond, one of the Lost Boys, was nominated for Best Actor Under 10. He lost to Joseph Gordon-Levitt for A River Runs Through It.
Never actually seen that one. I mean, I know, of course, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but Rashawn Hammond was Thudbutt in this movie, my favorite Lost Boy, even including Rufio. So that's a little bit of a shock, though, because he was really great.
The movie, however, did win Best Family Motion Picture, and damn right. Also, at the Golden Globes, Dustin Hoffman was nominated for Best Actor in a Comedy or Musical. He lost to Robin Williams for The Fisher King. Not for this film.
What? I mean, I haven't seen The Fisher King in a long time, so I don't recall exactly that performance, but okay. Like, sorry, but this is like an iconic performance. The movie is named after his character, for gosh sakes. It's not Peter Pan, it's not Pan, it's Hook. Because they're like, this is what's bringing the heat in this particular performance, so like, pay attention.
Yeah, and it has been a while since I've watched The Fisher King as well, but I don't remember it being either a comedy or a musical at all.
I guess they figure Robin Williams is there if he cracks one joke, it now qualifies as a comedy.
Yeah, but that's like saying Tim Curry is in a comedy film when he plays Pennywise in the old TV
He's
movie.
He's laughing a lot, though.
Yeah, that's very true.
He is just funny.
However, at the Razzies, Julia Roberts was nominated for Worst Supporting Actress. She lost to Sean Young from A Kiss Before Dying for playing one of the twins. And at the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards, this film was given a dishonorable mention. The winner that year was Nothing But Trouble. However, you were about to say...
That one's bad.
Yeah. However, that did not hurt the box office. This film had a budget of $70 million and domestically grossed $119 million. Worldwide, $300 million, and sat at number 1 for 4 consecutive weeks. When it debuted on the December 13th, 1991 weekend, it debuted at number 1, of course, with a grand total of $13.5 million. The only other debuting film that weekend was The Last Boy Scout. It debuted at number 2. And then at number 3 was Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, one of the best Star Trek films. We know this because it has an even number. The rule is true. However, the reason we are here, aside from, bringing Greg back on the show because that's awesome, the critics. Over at Metacritic, this film has a Metascore of 52, and at Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score is 76%, which, you know what, I could almost see that 76%. I still think it's a little low, but it's still fair.
No, that 76 is too damn low. You need to bring that up at least 15 points, sir.
However, the tomatometer, and critics hang your heads in shame for this one, 29% for this film.
I feel like the reason why, and once again, I don't think it was that bad, but I feel like Julia Roberts is the bleeding wound here that's causing this score to go down, because when I was reading a lot of the reviews, many of them were citing her specifically as a problem in the movie. And I'm like, okay, yeah, she wasn't the greatest, but do we really think that one potentially bad apple ruins the entire 2 hour and 21 minute bunch? No, I don't think so. No. She's not even in the film that much. Her character disappears for wide swaths in the middle.
And you have to appreciate the fact that when they did filming her scenes, I mean, aside from the one where she gets all big. By the way, this film is, doing the math, 32 years old as of this year as we're recording this. So if you haven't seen it by now, I need to
take some medication from my back now.
Well, that's what the rum is for.
Yeah, true.
But by the way, if you have not seen this film by now, that's on you guys. We're going to spoil this. So you're warned, okay? When she gets big and talks to Peter, obviously that scene is shot together. But for the most part, she's doing all of this by herself on a soundstage, like green screen, the whole thing. Like, that's not easy at all.
It's not easy for even a well-seasoned actress who's been in the business for decades. But here she's still relatively early in her career. Yeah. So I think considering what she was up against, kudos. You did a great job.
Yeah. Also, when you think about it, none of the movies, to my recollection, none of the movies that she had done up to this point had that level of green screen work at all. These days, you're in any Marvel film or Star Wars film or whatever, and yeah, you're pretty much pointing and screaming at things that don't exist, like you're on the set of Cliff Beasts. By the way, if you haven't watched The Bubble, you have to go watch The Bubble. But let's get into the breakdown of this. And we got to start with Peter Pan himself, Robin Williams. How was he for you?
Perfect. He was absolutely perfect for me. First of all, I always like when they take a well-known character like Peter Pan. I mean, we even have a psychological condition called Peter Pan syndrome about, people who don't grow up out of their adolescent, devil-may-care attitudes and are more self-centered and everything. He was, I think, the ideal version of what the anti-Peter Pan would grow up into. He was essentially what Peter Pan would be afraid to grow into. And he did it perfectly, where he is as Jack describes, essentially a corporate pirate who swoops in and just takes things away from other people and say, that's mine now. He, is all about business. He doesn't care about fun. He doesn't care about his kids at first, and there's the one scene specifically that really, really speaks to me. And it's where they're on the airplane and Jack is just banging this baseball against the window, kind of being an annoying little bastard. And he says, stop acting like a child. And Jack laughs and kind of says, I am a child. And Robin Williams immediately fires back, grow up. And I think that just really speaks volumes about not only the character, the anti-character of Peter Pan, but also even you could say it's a case study for how parenting styles kind of were in the late 80s, early 90s, as opposed to what it might even be today, So it was awesome. I think Robin Williams, as we kind of discussed before, he is the perfect guy who can do the deadpan serious. And then once he finds that resurrection, that rejuvenation of his inner child, the smile that comes on his face, the pure joy that's in his eyes and in his laughter really makes you believe he was Peter Pan. He does have the true essence of what an inner child is.
When you think about when this movie came out too, this is the beginning of the 90s. Of course, they probably started filming it in 89 or something like that. So you're in that Wall Street era, greed is good type of economic feel to society, right? And as you get into the 90s, it's that realization of maybe greed is not good. And you have Peter Pan, who grew up and became that kind of character, right? The business driven, the deal is all that matters. Don't bug me, I'm working kind of mentality at the cost of his family. It's also, when you think about Peter Pan syndrome, one of the characters in popular culture that I've always thought of as a perfect character to describe Peter Pan syndrome, aside from Peter Pan himself, is Doctor Who. When you think about it, the Doctor is hundreds and maybe 1,000 years old, but there's still that childlike wonder and sense of discovery. And you take a look at actors like David Tennant and Matt Smith, and they got it. When they're happy, they're super happy and very childlike and exploring everything. But then they also have that serious side. And you needed an actor like a Robin Williams who could do both, who could be, have childlike wonder and hard-boiled cynicism at the same time in the same movie and have it work. If someone had cast Robin Williams as Doctor Who in a big screen version of that, he would have been the perfect Doctor Who for that, I think, because of his ability to play both sides. And because you had someone like Robin Williams, because you had someone who was so good at what he did, that's why this film works. Tom Hanks, I think, you're right. Tom Hanks definitely could have done this too, I think. But I think Robin Williams was perfect in 1991 for that.
Yeah, I think if this movie came out about 5 years later, Tom Hanks could have been an ideal fit for the role. But at this stage, I think Robin Williams was the perfect choice for it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the movie allowed for him to get those little improv-y one-liners in there as well. It still felt like Robin Williams comedy in those moments. That wasn't Tom Hanks's forte, even though you saw in Big, you had a very nuanced performance of both childlike wonder and uncertainty, but Robin Williams was able to put everything, like the kitchen sink, into this performance.
And I think that also feeds into why he's perfect for Peter Pan. Because if you remember, the character of Peter Pan is an adolescent boy who the book never quite puts an age on him, but they say he still has all of his milk teeth, as they call it. So like his baby teeth. So he's not old enough to hit puberty yet. But he's supposed to be sword fighting with Captain Hook and constantly sending jibes and insults to him, like calling him a codfish and things like that. So I think the fact that Robin Williams, even as an adult, when he doesn't quite become Pan yet, but he's trying to. The fact that he's able to sling insults to Rufio in that paramecium scene that you referenced earlier, that also does kind of fit with Peter Pan would have this natural gift of just coming up on the fly with a crack towards somebody.
Mm-hmm. I wonder too, and putting this out into the ether as well, we talked about Peter Pan and in this moment in time in reality, I wonder how many people, how many dads watch this movie, and the entire premise being don't get so caught up in work and life that you miss out on living. I wonder how much of this movie became all of a sudden an unexpected wake up call for those hardworking, nose down, knuckles to the grindstone kind of workers.
I mean, I would hope it would have been like that, yeah, because really, if you ask me, this is me going on like a little bit of a deep dive here, so let me stand on my soapbox here. Hold on. Okay, I'm up. Peter Pan, both the original text and this, are metaphors for a midlife crisis. Because in this movie with Robin Williams, with Hook, the midlife crisis is being had by Peter Pan, where he is essentially, I'm knee deep in my career. My kids are growing up faster than I can keep track of. I'm missing their childhood, but I'm still constantly being buried with work. I'm trying to do this for the good of my family, for the good of people, because he's trying to get funds to put up a charity wing for an orphanage, I think it is, or a hospital. He feels like he's doing good, but at the same time, he's missing everything. Even his wife says, like, you're not there for the games. You're not there for, them on the plane trip. And they're clearly showing that they don't have affections for him. Jack's drawing of them falling out of the plane. First of all, that was clearly meant to upset him because he knows his father has a fear of heights. He doesn't draw him with a parachute because he's, essentially that's his passive aggressive jab at him. And then of course, this is about, as I referenced before, finding your inner childhood, finding that connection with your kids and realizing what's more important, my job or my family. And, granted, I think that there is, in a reality sense, a better way to handle this transition rather than just throwing your phone out the window with literally a $5 billion deal on the line. But that's kind of like the movie shorthand for like he's going to now fully embrace his family. Meanwhile, if you go back to the original text of Peter Pan, the midlife crisis, and in my opinion, the main character, is being had by Captain Hook. He is constantly fighting against his inner child who is taunting him about, I'm youthful, I can do things you can't. You used to be able to fly. Now you can't. You're stuck on the ground. Parts of your body no longer work. I will now cut off your hand. The specter of death is constantly hunting you in the form of a crocodile, and you can hear the ticking of your life ticking away as it gets closer. So really, the entire thing, either side of it, as long as a Peter Pan is done well, should be about some kind of, wake-up call of life is for living. You shouldn't be too focused on the things that, yes, they're important to get through, like such as your job or other obligations, but don't forget that inner child. Don't forget that fun. That is what brings, enjoyment and pure magic to life, whether you're an adult or a child.
I want to jump off of that point and move on to Carolyn Goodall, who played Moira Banning, Peter's wife. One of the good things I liked about this film is that despite Peter's obliviousness to how much he's distanced himself from his family, Moira is supportive, but still, very seriously trying to break through to Peter to get him to see reality. I really like what they did with Moira in this.
I think, she's definitely the supportive wife. She feels to me like the kind of person who definitely recognizes, what Peter is doing is important. It does provide us with a comfortable lifestyle. Definitely puts food on the table, lets us be able to take trips to Europe, clothes on our back kind of thing. So I will support him, and I would try to usher the children out of his way so he can focus on his deals. But she also is prioritizing simultaneously. These are also your kids, and you are missing everything. You need to come focus and be with them. The one thing I especially thought was well done on her part, it's at the very, very end of the film where she is sitting in the nursery that is empty in her perspective, and Granny Wendy comes up and says, "You've been up here like all night, come back to bed." And then suddenly Jack and Maggie are in their beds, and they get out of bed and they go and hug her. The look that she has on her face, like, am I dreaming? Is this real? What is happening? I'm about to have a mental breakdown because I believe that my kids are here, but they can't be, but they are. That to me is like, if I could just, take that clip and show it to people, like, this is what I think a good actress looks like.
Oh,
she does it without any words, just the expression on her face and like a little bit of a cry, and it's perfect.
Yeah, Carolyn Goodall really nailed it, and the story did well to write her that way. Like, it didn't have to be, screamy or whatever. Like, it was great writing and great acting as well. But let's talk about those kids, Charlie Cosmo and Amber Scott as Jack and Maggie. Now, remember too, this is Amber Scott's first and only film that she's ever done. But how are the kids for you?
I mean, I don't want to sound mean, but I really like Jack. I think he's a good part of the story. Maggie feels like an afterthought, like, we got to have something for the little girls to have a buy-in to the story. Otherwise, they're not going to connect to this. Because if you look at what happens with Maggie, she is always on her dad's side. She never has that disconnect of like, dad doesn't love me, dad doesn't care. Maybe it's because she's the younger child and she still has the innate, automatic, almost given love for her parents. While Jack seems a bit older and he's kind of losing that. He's a bit more disillusioned because he's seen the evidence of dad never shows up to my games, blah, blah, blah. And he did show up to her play. So that's also a point for him in her book. But when they get to Neverland, Hook is able to clearly start to put the worm in Jack's ear about your parents don't love you. They just sing you lullabies at night to shut you up. They don't actually care about you. But Maggie is steadfast in her opinions. No, you're a liar. I hate you. I will never listen to you. And Hook is smart. He gets the doubter out of the room and almost literally out of the movie. We don't see her again until the third act with the big fight where she's randomly in some other room with some other children. That must be a deleted scene of like other kids Hook kidnapped thinking they were Peter's kids, and they're just there because they're not Lost Boys. Clearly, they're in like more modern day normal clothes, but it's she feels like an afterthought. If you told me that they put her in only as rewrites or reshoots, I would kind of believe it because she's not really significant to the story. The only thing that she really provides to the Peter Pan mythos in general is the idea of a girl in Neverland who can sing songs and tell stories that entertains the Lost Boys, or in this case, the pirates, who are kind of her version of the Lost Boys because they all flock around her for some kind of, feminine comfort or soothing, like a motherly kind of thing, even though she's like 8 at the time. Jack, however, he does kind of fit more perfectly with the extension of Peter Pan. Like, of course, Peter Pan would have a lost boy that, he essentially loses. And of course, that boy would not be part of the Lost Boys. And kind of following his father's footsteps, he would go the other way. And he would go towards the antithesis of that, almost the exact opposite. He would go towards Hook. So in terms of Amber Scott, I don't think she did anything bad. I think for, the job that she did fine. But in terms of her relevance to the plot, I would probably just cut her out.
I'm going to argue that one. Hear me out on this. I mean, yes, Charlie Cosmo as Jack was great. And needed to be like really the catalyst that, for Jack starting to really get angry before really snapping. But I think you needed Maggie in order to counterbalance that, right? You have Jack, who's getting to the age where, he's starting to feel disconnected. He's starting to, realize that work, has to exist and it is going to get in the way, and he doesn't like that. Maggie's there to show, that youthful, unrequited love for the parents, despite how hard they're working. It's one of those things too. And plus, Maggie's also still an anchor for Jack as well. Jack, as scorned as he feels, Maggie still loves him as well. So Maggie's almost the tether for Jack while they're in Neverland. So while it's not a big role, I think it's still an important role in how Maggie relates to both Jack and Peter, as opposed to, having more to do.
That's fair. I like that. I like that analysis. I just wish that we had at least one other check-in with her before the end, because she just literally disappears, and then I would have liked to see her at least kind of plotting an escape attempt of some kind to try to get out, but she just kind of is in that room.
But you were right, though. When Captain Hook gets Maggie out of the room, that's when Jack loses his tether, loses his anchor, and he's set adrift. Pardon all the pirate, motifs here, but this is kind of the movie that we're talking about. Without Maggie to kind of ground him into that reality, he's on his own. And he's not ready to be on his own, because he's trying to battle all these feelings that he has as well. Maggie, at least, with Maggie there, he was still able to kind of protect, their normal life. With Maggie not there, Jack had to fend for himself.
And I think that is also an interesting kind of pseudo, how do we want to say, kind of like a pseudo analysis or inspection of what it might have been for the Lost Boys when they each arrived, because surely each of those boys, except for maybe the twins, arrived independently or on their own, rather. I feel like Peter must have brought them over one at a time as he found them. And the idea of them having to go through that same thing of their tether to the world they knew before slowly fading and disintegrating, and them settling in there, I think that's interesting. And especially to now see a case of it going on the other side of where it's in the pirate camp as opposed to the Lost Boys camp. So yeah, I definitely see how she does provide a reinforcement of that tie to the previous life, rather than just let him immediately okay, open up my skull and wash my brain.
All right, let's move on to Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook. And literally, this is the personification that a lot of people will point to and go, that's how you kids movie villain. Dustin Hoffman, his performance for you.
Absolute, positively bangarang. Perfect to a T. He is trying to have the authority, the intimidation, but also wants to come off as somewhat charismatic and charming. So he knows how to perfectly balance the line. He seems like a good leader, the kind of person who wants his men's morale to be up, but also wants them to know that when I bark, you better pay attention and take notice of what I'm telling you to do. I think it's also one of the most iconic intros for a character, where you have Smee, Mr. Smee, marching through the town with a newly sharpened and polished hook on a velvet pillow, having everyone chant the name behind him, Hook, Hook, show us the hook. And it's like this big, almost like a ticker tape parade procession up to the captain's quarters. You have the hook attached to his arm, flashes almost like as if it's a old-timey newspaper photographies of the flash bulbs going off. And then he comes out and he's almost like a politician, like a president on his balcony addressing his people. I was like, oh, Evita's about to happen, And then, of course, you have the whole boo box situation where he shows, I'm here to tell you we're mission accomplished. We were successful, but I'm also letting you know, still don't doubt me. Don't you ever dare consider me weak for one moment. And he puts Glenn Close in the boo box. And by the way, for those who don't know, the bearded pirate, Glenn Close, one of the best performances of, I think, all time.
That's the thing. Once you realize who it is, that scene is so
you can't not
fun.
see it. You that's 1,000% Glenn Close.
Right? But it is true. When you decide to take on the role of an iconic movie animated villain, and you're going to do it in live action, you have to become basically 3 times your size. You have to, exceed the movie screen, through your, flamboyance, through everything. And Dustin Hoffman got that.
Oh, 1,000%. Like, kind of going with what you're saying, of being bigger than your size. Let's look at another franchise with popular villains. Let's look at Jack Nicholson as the Joker. He owned that role. He's like, I'm a sociopath, but I'm also have a weird sense of humor, and he made it work. Meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who played Mr. Freeze, 1,000% miscast. He was doing nothing but ice puns and was just kind of like, almost felt like he was, just taking the easy way out for that role and not really putting in all that he could to make the character his own and to build the character up and make him big. And Dustin Hoffman, like you said, he is a monument. So much so that I don't know if this had always had the title of Hook or not, or if his performance changed that, but I would believe you if you told me the latter, because it is that awesome of a performance. And when we get to the end of our episode here and you do the MVP, there is no way that we're both not saying Dustin Hoffman is Captain Hook.
Really? Is there?
Yeah, okay. If you want to go like, okay, but what if I don't include him as, then that's fine. But like, I think 99 out of 100 people would say, yeah, he's clearly the standout star of this film.
And there's 2 performances that I parallel with Dustin Hoffman in this. The first one, it's similar. Real obscure movie, though, the pirate movie from like the early 80s. Ted Hamilton as the Pirate King, and that was again as flamboyant and larger than the screen. He was larger than the pirate boots that he was wearing, and it was so much fun. The other one that comes to mind is Tim Curry as Dr. Frankenfurter from the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Right.
Like, again, a performance that leaps off the screen, a performance that character becomes so like honestly, like when you think about probably 1991 Halloween, 92 Halloween the next year, how many Captain Hooks do you think were out there?
Oh, I believe it. I think there's probably also a ton of Rufios, but yeah, Captain Hook was an amazing character. And I also do like at the end the vulnerability, well, even throughout the movie, because there was the suicide scene where Hook is kind of showing that he's also vulnerable, that in close quarters with Smee, which there's a side bit we can get into there whenever you're ready for it. He does show, he kind of drops his guard and he goes, I have anxieties, I have fears, I have concerns. This is not going to plan. I don't have control over this. I don't like this, And then at the end, one of the lines that really sticks with me is when they remove Hook's wig and you see that he's actually this aged, almost decrepit looking man. And he tells Peter, hand me my dignity. You owe me at least that. I was like, damn, this character is more complex than you even think.
And there's the thing too, like you have a character who, aside from being as big as they are, we're talking a character with a blood feud. We're talking a character with like a never-ending desire to hunt down the one person. He even says, like, if you don't find me right now, I will find your children and their children's children and their children. I will just take you down throughout the entire bloodline unless we do this right now. So yeah, he is absolutely gunning for Peter in every way. Oh yeah, like if you took some of those lines that Captain Hook said in this film and put them in a Game of Thrones reading, I think they would probably still fit.
Oh, yeah.
But the fact that Dustin Hoffman pulls this off, like this is the template. If you're going to live action an animated tale, that he's the template, and it was spot on. But since
I think the reason why it works especially well is because Spielberg knows how to make a movie for the whole family. It's not geared just towards kids. This is not geared just towards adults. He has hidden a perfect middle line that works. Even like I said in the suicide scene where Hook literally has a gun pointed to his head and says, I'm going to blow my brains out, Smee, if you don't get over here right now. he's able to do it with enough levity in the situation, but not being an outright goofball that like even kids be like, oh, that's funny. He's being a silly pants.
Yeah. But since you mentioned him, let's talk about Bob Hoskins as Smee. How was he for you?
I think he was also really great. I mean, since you mentioned the other almost cast with Joe Pesci and Danny DeVito, I kind of feel like Bob Hoskins is the perfect line between the two of them with two specific scenes I'm going to reference. Smee is definitely the number one most devoted person to Captain Hook. You know, he's the boatswain. He, you know, is going to be the captain's right-hand man. But he also does self-serve a lot, but he does it in a sneaky way. Of course, we know the scene at the end where, you know, Hook says, Smee, do something intelligent, and he runs in the back room, and he just starts loading his pants full of gold, ready to get out there and just like, I'm going to look after me. Like, this is over. I just need to get ready for whatever future I can grab onto right now. So that's the greedy side of Smee in terms of wealth. But I think the other part that shows him being a bit greedy is with eating. There's a scene where he is putting together a food plate for Hook, and he's taking greedy bites out of the food before putting on the food. And you can argue, of course, oh, but he's maybe doing like a poison testing for him because poison is a big part of Neverland. But he's taking massive bites out of that thing. And I feel like Joe Pesci would lean more towards the I want all the money side of Smee. Danny DeVito would have been more towards the I want to constantly be stuffing my face side of Smee. And Bob Hoskins kind of hits it perfectly in the middle, where I can believe he's both gluttonous and greedy, but not too much.
I'm not trying to, cast aspersions on these other actors here, but I think if you put Danny DeVito and Joe Pesci in this, it's going to be too slapstick. You're probably going to get that Joe Pesci from Lethal Weapon 3 level type of comedy. With Danny DeVito, I don't know what level of comedy you're going to get out of that, whether it be Twins or Taxi. But I think with Bob Hoskins, and he showed what he could do with Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like that film is, again, speaking of iconic films with animation involved in it, like he so sold that film. With a very multifaceted character. Here, not only do you have, a great cartoon performance of that character, especially, during the baseball scene when he's doing the little shuffle step before he does the pitch. Like, that's so Disney, right? He almost embodied the actual cartoon character of Smee in that sense. Mm-hmm. But the camaraderie, the back and forth, the connection between him and Hoffman, between Smee and Hook, right? It's the perfect 1-2 punch. How they actually balance each other. I know, if you take a look at IMDb and you go through the quotes, the two of them are basically workshopping these characters, and they're like, oh, wait a second. Like they're flamboyant. These two characters are gay. That's the thing. And it's not out there, but it's a partnership between the two of them that runs deeper than just a couple of pirates that are stealing everything. This is a friendship, and for someone, again, for Hook, who's basically living his life as a blood feud, to have a character like Smee shows that capability of that kind of connection.
I heard this thing online recently. I don't remember the source, unfortunately, but it was this interesting theory this guy had that said that in the most recent generations, meaning like Gen X, millennial, and before, we as males in society, at least the North American societies, were kind of taught that the only time that it's acceptable to touch another male is if you're having some kind of a confrontation. So that's why in a lot of media, you'll see whenever guys actually physically interact, it's in some kind of a sport situation or a fight or a intimidation situation. Maybe it's a high five, but like even still, like that's kind of in the realm of like contest or competition or victory. But to just have that physical touch and connection without it being one of those things is what you see a lot in fantasies. So the reason why people always make jokes about Frodo and Sam being of a certain way, quote, quote, in The Lord of the Rings is because it's kind of a male fantasy to be able to have that physical connection with another person and have it not be, sexually charged at all. It's just, I want to have the comfort and understanding from another person that they are there for me, that they are really to support me. And yes, there is, like you said, on IMDb, the whole thing of Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins saying like, oh, well, one of our characters is secretly gay. That's our actor's secret. And if you do watch them, they are kind of, especially Bob Hoskins towards Dustin Hoffman, very touchy. He does touch him a lot on his chest and on his back and everything. But I'm kind of taking that more as it is because they are such good actual friends that they actually can rely and confide in each other. So whether or not they actually are a couple, quotation marks, doesn't matter. It's the point that they actually understand each other. They can share each other's secrets. They know each other's deepest fears, and they support each other through thick and thin. And they've probably done so for God knows how long, because Peter Pan, I think the original, I think they say his character is from like the 18th century, 17th century, something like that. So like, for all we know, Hook and Smee have been around for that long, if not longer. So that's a long time to go with a best friend, and that's wonderful. So I feel like if you did do any other casting other than these two in these roles, you would miss out on that connection because they were willing to go there and accurately and like really beautifully demonstrate that, men can have a close emotional connection with each other,
that's
regardless of any kind of, quote, relationship status.
Yeah. Two guys can love each other without loving each other, right?
Yeah.
That's what a good, solid, strong, long-lasting friendship is, and it's okay to say that. The other thing too is if you want to look at this in the context of the other characters in the film, Peter is having that problem reconnecting with his own childhood and reconnecting with his own child. You've got Hoffman as Hook, who's so tunnel visioned on his revenge for Peter that he can't see the good that he actually has in his life already.
He's got it made in the shade already.
Yeah, he could be happy with his friend and with his crew and go off and do pirate. But instead, he's so tunnel visioned on one thing that, even though he does rely on Shmi, and even though he, really kind of leans on Shmi, but it won't say that he leans on Shmi, he cannot get out of his own head in that one thing. And that really, if Hook is saying, go do something smart and Shmi bails, maybe that's Shmi in a way saying, yeah, you're kind of, you need to deal with this.
Mm-hmm. This is not healthy, and I don't know if I can help you out of this.
Exactly. So I'm going to grab some gold and get the out of here. Like that.
Right. And also, I think even as a kid, I'm like, but where are you going? Like, if Peter Pan takes over this town, that gold means nothing. The Lost Boys don't have a currency.
Okay. We talked about her a little bit earlier, but we got to talk about Julia Roberts here. And before we do, before we get into the actual performance of Tinkerbell here, we need to get this out there. At the time that they were filming, and this is from research, again, we are not Hollywood insiders. We are, well-versed idiots with microphones.
Nerds in basements with microphones, as you say, yeah.
Right? But here's the thing. At the time that this film was being filmed, she had a wedding to Kiefer Sutherland that was called off 3 days before the wedding.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Right? You see all these comments that, that they were nicknaming her Tinker Hell at the time of filming. But if someone's going through a lot at that time, like you have to be like Tinkerbell as a character is someone that's going to be, bright and sprightly and happy and joyful and dealing with all of this. And at the same time, if your personal life is falling apart, that's got to be hard to compartmentalize. And knowing, at the time in 91, pushing the filming back a day or two is thousands of dollars on you. So it's one of those things where anyone who says that Julia Roberts was hard to work with, maybe ask yourself, why was Julia Roberts at that moment hard to work with? And if she was, maybe there's a reason why. But aside from what was going on behind the scenes, how was she for you?
Like I said, I don't think she was the strongest point in here. And as we discussed previously, I feel like a lot of that is credit to the fact that she is acting against nothing, because clearly it's green screened and like superimposing her as tiny size onto, Robin Williams when she's walking on his chest, or in front of Captain Hook when she's like negotiating the 3 days terms. I feel like they also had trouble finding moments for Tinkerbell to even have any kind of say into a scene, because there's plenty of times where she just disappears. And I feel like, especially in a movie where there's a 3-day deadline that he needs to be training, she should have been constantly there flying around, just being like, no, do this. Don't you remember it was like this, but they kind of cut her out there. So maybe that was some of the reasons why, like you said, she was having that issue and they meant to film it, but they didn't. But actually, if you ask me, I think given Tinkerbell, the character herself, the heartbreak that Julia Roberts personally might have been going through actually could have fed into a better portrayal of Tinkerbell. Because Tinkerbell is all about unrequited love. She loves Peter, but Peter was always too young to be able to love. That he was too self-centered and too young to appreciate what a romantic feeling could be. And so she would do things for him out of a pure loyalty and devotion because she had such feelings for him. And I mean, who hasn't had that kind of relationship in your life before, especially when you're younger? Of, I will totally help you with your homework. I will totally go and wash your car for you. I will totally do this or that. Like even if you didn't actually do that, you would have offered that to this person. And you just would bend over backwards and grab the moon out of the sky for them, hoping they'd at least give you a smile. And so I think, especially the scene when they show her in her little apartment and she's crying, and Peter has finally discovered himself again. He's acting like a kid again. And I mean, she's happy that, her plan worked, but at the same time, he still is not seeing her. I think that's a great scene. And I remember, especially as a kid, not understanding why she gets big. Being, I don't get this is stupid. And then kind of realizing now as an adult, well, it's because it's magic, and magic doesn't have to explain itself to you. It's magic because it's magic. And I think as much as that scene is powerful, that Tinkerbell finally does get that kind of resolution to her greatest wish of being able to show her affections and true to Peter. I just feel like Julia Roberts herself, especially in that scene, the one scene she gets to have with another human being on set, I feel like that's actually her weakest scene. She really just kind of drops the ball there. She's like, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going on. Like, you should just be jumping at the chance to fully lay everything on the table now, but she's not. So I think that if she had stayed a fairy the entire time, that might have actually improved her overall performance.
I mean, from a scripting standpoint, and apparently they brought in Carrie Fisher to kind of help with some of the lines for Tinkerbell and to, write it in a way that, that Tinkerbell could have some of that witty kind of back and forth with someone like Robin Williams, because, of course, Carrie Fisher was a phenomenally funny writer as well.
Yeah.
And I think that helped. That really helped. By the way, all those names that were mentioned at the beginning of the film, the Winona Ryders and your Samantha Mathises, I want to interject, a recast for this role. And it's Mia Sara, who was in Legend.
The one film I haven't watched, because I tried watching 5 minutes of it and I was like, this is stupid, and I didn't like it.
But of course, she was also in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, okay. I know
she was Sloane, yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny too, because when we did the Legend episode, if I remember correctly, I actually referenced Julia Roberts as Tinkerbell to Mia Sara in this, or it might have been the girl who played Una. But still, the fact of the matter is that you do have a very complicated character in Tinkerbell. She is capable of one emotion at a time. And, again, when she becomes big, with that the biggest emotion that she's had, it makes sense when you're not a kid, once you've grown up and you kind of go back and look at it. But I think the thing is, in the moment, and again, this might be something where they're taking a character, a beloved character like Tinkerbell, and giving her complex emotions at the time, maybe not resonating with the audience, but in hindsight, it does, because yes, not everyone is just a cookie cutter character. Characters can have complex emotions, even if that character is not capable of handling those emotions all at once. And that makes a fascinating character study for Julia Roberts to work with.
And I think this is what I've said often, when you do live action remakes of a story that we know well, or in this case, like a sequel to a story that we know well, you have to bring something new to the table that the first one didn't say, or some kind of resolution to characters and their growth and journey that wasn't fully realized before. And so the idea of, like you said, Tinkerbell, who's kind of a one note, like just ride or die, undoubting loyalty. Like she drank poison for Peter, literally. Like that is part of the books. Julia Roberts references it here, just to prevent it from going to Peter's lips. To her have these complex emotions of like, I literally drank poison for you and you're not even giving me like a second thought. That's great that character gets that, development and further growth. So yeah, I agree that it should be something like this. It shouldn't just be a repeat of what we've seen plenty of times before.
Let's talk about Maggie Smith, who of course
talk about her.
Who of course played Wendy Darling, the much older Wendy Darling at this point. And for those of you who don't know who Maggie Smith is, just go watch Harry Potter films, because that's Mrs. McGonagall. But how was Maggie Smith?
That's where I'm kidding.
All of a sudden it kind of kicks in here. But how was Maggie Smith for you?
Maggie Smith was amazing here. The scene where they first introduce her and she's silhouetted against the snowy window at the top of the stairs and just says, "Hello, boy," in a soft but like inviting kind of way. That's iconic and I love it. Also the soundtrack at that moment is like pure magic. The soft flute and the strings when she meets the Darling kids and telling them the rule of like, in this house, we have one rule. There's no growing up. Stop right now. Like chef's kiss. Perfect. In fact, so much so that how you'll see an actor or actress a bunch of times, but it's usually that one role that then sticks out in your mind, like, that was great, I should know that person's name, and you learn the person's name. This was mine for Maggie Smith, even as a young boy. And keep in mind, when this movie came out, I was 5, maybe? Yeah, I was 5 at the time, 5.5 or so. But like, even still, I was like, this is a person, I like what she does. I like this actress. And pretty much the only thing that unseated Maggie Smith as being Granny Wendy in any other movie I saw her in was McGonagall. That's the only thing that's come close to upseating that automatic, that's the first reference I know her from. So, like, this is a fantastic role. I think when you see her, especially when she's talking to Peter, you get the depth in her eyes and in her slightly faded and kind of weak, but, cracked smile of like, I used to love you. I still love you. I'm so happy that you're still part of my life, but it also breaks my heart that you ended up with my granddaughter and not me. Why not me? You get that a lot. And like, Maggie Smith is the actress who can bring that without saying any of those words. If you watch her face, you will see all that come through.
Oh, some of the most brutal yet still caring lines come from her in this film. It's the one where Peter's describing what it is he does, and she's looking and goes, "Peter, you're a pirate." Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you're like,
gut-wrenching,
right? And it's the performance is filled with wit and wisdom. Everything that makes Professor McGonagall so good in the Harry Potter films, it's here as well. It's almost like she workshopped McGonagall with this role and then carried like all of that to that character in the Harry Potter films.
It kind of does feel like that. You're right. Also, I have no idea how old Maggie Smith is anymore because, like, I understand that Hollywood has a thing called makeup, so they can make her look older than she is. But in here, she looks older than McGonagall ever did. You know, so, like, Maggie Smith is, to me, like a timeless beauty. I love her so much. The day that she dies, all the flags need to go to half-mast. Just say, like.
Right. Wands up. And salute at that point. Okay, let's get back to Neverland here.
Okay.
It's time to talk to Rufio.
Oh, Rufio. Oh. I'm going to let you go first on this one because I have a lot to say and I don't want to, like, steamroll you. Go ahead.
Okay, so as played by Dante Basco, coolest haircut ever. Like, everyone's going to want the mohawk. But the thing I like about Rufio here, it's not necessarily what he does, it's what he represents. You know, in the absence of Peter in Neverland, there's a vacuum.
Yes.
Go
ahead.
The Lost Boys are lost, period. Right? Someone has to become, for lack of a better term, the Pan. Right? And here's Rufio, who is strong enough, you know, and capable enough to lead, but not in a way like Pan did. Not in a way, like, think about it. The Lost Boys are hidden away from Hook. You mentioned the kids, the rest of the kids in the boat. You have to think some of them are Lost Boys. So they're hiding away. So he's capable enough to keep them out of harm's way, but not good enough to lead them against Hook. It's because no one else can step up. He's the leader that they need at the time, but not the leader that they need. And aside from the fact that he has, for lack of a better term, Pan envy, right? It's, you know, it's almost like the Peter principle. He was promoted beyond his means. And he's basically scrambling at this point to try to maintain that hold on that position when Peter comes back.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his character, everything that you're saying is true. And especially, I want to zero in on his introduction. Rufio's introduction, where he comes screaming into the scene, sailing on a skateboard with a kind of like a sail on it. So that way he looks like he's flying. He's riding the wind. And then he soars through the air on a trapeze like he's flying. And then he lands with a flourish. He, I think, is arguably a case, like almost a textbook example of imposter syndrome, where he thinks he has to be the Pan, but he doesn't know who he is as a leader. He's probably only ever seen Pan be the leader. And I don't know if when Pan left, if he automatically field promoted Rufio, like, you're going to take over now, like he does to Thudbutt before he leaves, or if Pan just left and then Rufio, like you said, it's a vacuum and he just filled that void. But it is clear he's trying to do everything he can to just be Peter Pan, when what he needs to be is Rufio. He should have been the leader that Rufio can be, not the leader that Pan was. But he's not doing that. He is holding up Pan's sword saying, I am the Pan. He's essentially, even in his own mind, elevated Peter to this godlike status that he can never achieve, but he will always reach for. And, you know, he's clearly leading the Lost Boys, but I also wonder, how good of a job are you doing? I mean, he just seems to be trying to keep the status quo. And maybe for the Lost Boys, that's fine. But also, we do see that there's other kids who have been kidnapped. And even when Peter says, before he becomes Peter Pan, he's just still Peter Banning, Hook has my kids. He should have been like, awesome, new game. It's called Rescue the Kids. But he doesn't. You know, he's like, no, we're not doing that because I didn't come up with the idea, so we're not going to do that. To me, I think the most close analogy in my mind that I draw to Rufio, and this is going to sound weird, but stick with me, is Starscream from Transformers.
Oh,
Starscream.
He so is.
Starscream is the Decepticon who is, I don't know if he was second in command, but he was definitely like always vying for a leadership role amongst the Decepticons. And Megatron was always in that spot. And he was like clearly a good leader, but Starscream was like, I want to be the leader. I will. He even plots against Megatron a couple times. There was one episode I remember specifically where Starscream actually does get to be the leader, where I think it would happen to Megatron, but for a brief moment, Starscream fills that void and he absolutely blows it. He absolutely botches the job and almost gets the Decepticons like wiped out, and then Megatron has to come in and like save them. But really, Rufio is Starscream, and like once you see that, you can't not see it.
Okay, but if Hook is Megatron, does that make Shmi Soundwave?
Yes, 1,000%. Yes.
I can't believe we've now turned our Hook review into a Transformers movie conversation, but here we are. But the other thing too with Rufio is after Peter reclaims or reconnects with his youthful side, once Peter's back to being Peter Pan, and they go and they fight Hook, and there's a moment where Hook starts taunting Rufio, and you see the smile on his face, and I liken it to star athletes who are not ready to wear the C for their jersey. Here, I'm going way off the board here, but hear me out here, okay? You take a look at players who were drafted high, and a lot of pressure put on them. And the first player that comes to mind, real obscure, Alexander Daigle, who was drafted first overall by the Ottawa Senators in the early 90s, and all the pressure was put on him. Like, the reason why there's an entry-level contract system in the NHL is because of Alexander Daigle getting like millions of dollars before playing game one. So all this pressure on him for a team that really wasn't winning at the time either. When they finally traded him away, and the pressure wasn't on him, he was like a third-line center. He started playing better because the weight was off of him.
Right.
I think the weight of leadership on Rufio was weighing on him a bit, especially with Pan back. Once all of a sudden he handed the sword over, he was able to be himself again. Yeah.
You can definitely see like a weight is off his shoulders, and he gets much more levity in his character after that.
Mm-hmm. It's again, another nuanced performance, and Dante Basco really, really did well. I'm going to let you take the lead on all the Lost Boys as a whole here, because for me, and Spielberg has come out and said when they were filming this movie, he felt that he got the parts before and after Neverland really well done, but the parts in Neverland at times felt rushed. And there were a lot of Lost Boys thrown at you with all at once, with not a lot of character development from each. You had like, the larger one, you had the alfalfa looking one, you had the one who talks funny. But I mean, the Lost Boys for you, how were they?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's also, there's an ambiguous number as to how many Lost Boys there are, because they really only focus on like, I don't know, like not including Rufio, maybe 8 of them. But then like when you have the big scene with the dinner scene, there seems to be like at least a good 24 of them, maybe 36. But then when you have the big climactic fight scene, there's like 4 volleys of kids who swing over. There's at least 8 kids doing like some kind of a boat, like, like coming up scene with like launching them with like the catapults. There's a bunch of kids, like, I don't know, there's like 1,000 kids, so I was even like, how many are there? But for the few that they do kind of give speaking roles and names to, first of all, like, yeah, it's IMDb lists a lot of their names, but like I don't think they actually ever say any of their names. Like we have Thud Butt, Don't Ask, Too Small, Latch Boy, No Nap. Like, okay, I guess maybe it was in deleted scenes, because the thing is, this movie is like 2.5 hours long, and back in the day for 91, I actually looked this up, the average running time for a movie was just under 2 hours. It was 117 minutes, like the statistical average. So this was pushing it in terms of what audiences were willing to accept back in the day in terms of length. So I'm sure there's a lot that was cut. But I like some of the personalities. And I definitely, if you look at the costuming here, I think that's the strongest part of The Lost Boys is the costumes. Because just looking at what they're wearing when they clearly arrived from the world to Neverland, you can tell almost immediately what time are they from, what country are they from even, and like with their accents. So like, don't ask. He's the one who clearly was from like early 20th century Brooklyn. You know, he kind of has that I don't know how to describe it, but he definitely has that accent, kind of the swagger about him, the unearned swagger of a young boy who thinks he's hot stuff. The little boy, I think his name is No Nap, who's like examining Peter in his face. I feel like he's from a slightly earlier time. Also, side note, and I do have to make this admission, just in case there's anyone like questioning my loyalty, like, oh, it's nostalgia. Like, this movie is also very meaningful to me, not just for nostalgia's sake, but also because it was my ASMR awakening. Do you know what ASMR is, Jason?
I do.
So that is where like you kind of get like this nice kind of like enjoyable tingle sensation throughout your head. You know, like it's hard to describe if you don't get it. But this movie was mine. And I remember very specifically the two scenes that did it for me the first time, and like always do it for me even now, is where No Nap is touching Peter's face and like trying to find the youthful version of Peter. And then also the scene where Peter and Thudbutt are just having the conversation on the bridge at night, and they're like talking about like, I remember my mother, and those like close, deep personal connection scenes. So like this is kind of, especially the Lost Boys, they do have a special place in my heart because they're kind of like the first ones to help me unlock that like enjoyable feeling, you know. But in terms of the actual characters and how they're presented, like I said, the costuming's great. The acting, they're kids, of course, that's fine. I kind of feel like it would have been a little bit better if maybe they stayed a bit more wild. I think the best time we see for the Lost Boys is when Peter first lands in Neverland, in the Lost Boys camp, I should say. And when they're kind of just running around hooting and hollering, it's a wild mess, you know. I think that's when they're at their best. I mean, they also do have a good scene where they're doing the training montage and they're all singing the song about getting in shape and everything, because that's kids playing. The Lost Boys is supposed to be all about play. Even when they go to war, it should be a game to them. And it kind of is, but I don't know, like, they definitely have moments where they're great, especially the food scene. But the rest of it, it's just, there's not enough character development for me to care about anybody but Thudbutt and Rufio. Those are the only two they actually give any time to. It would have been great if Peter had a heart-to-heart moment with any other character, any of the other Lost Boys. But, you know, once again, we're already hitting 2.5 hours. So I feel like there's something missing there. I almost like, and, you know, some people probably hate me for saying this, I almost wish this was a two-parter movie where we could have really dug down on those 3 days of him training and then getting to know the Lost Boys. But that's like in my dream world.
Maybe not a two-parter, but I could see it as a series.
Or like a miniseries, yeah.
Yeah, because there are a lot of things. And for the record, yes, I can easily see that whole like face touching scene where he's trying to find Peter's smile so we can recognize him.
It's that personal attention and connection. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's a cornerstone for a lot of ASMR videos that are out there. That whole very much personal attention, like just staring right at the camera kind of thing. I totally get that. But yes, there's a lot in this film that goes unexplained. You know, when Peter, falls off the plank and goes into the water, and then all of a sudden there's these 3 mermaids that breathe, kiss oxygen into his mouth. Like,
that's Neverland, baby.
Where did they come from? Where did they go? Why do we never see them again? And again, like a lot of these Lost Boys, where it's a very cursory introduction to them, and then they're just more a group as a whole as opposed to characters.
Yeah, and that's actually, you bring up a good point with the mermaids. I think one failing of the movie is they feel like they have to reference everything from the original Peter Pan canon. Like, the only thing they didn't really reference was the Native Americans, like Tiger Lily in here, which, I don't remember in the books them having any kind of an end. They're just still there and part of it. So the fact that they have the mermaids, that's like, okay, I guess they're still around, but it feels like when Peter gets there, other than Toodles, who left apparently of his own accord, it feels like all the Lost Boys that he left there are still there. And I think it would have been much more interesting if over the decades that Peter's been gone, if there were some accidents, or if there were some who decided to leave of their own, or there were some who even lost to the pirates, because over time you will have, you can't win them all, as they say. So this movie actually might have been better served if there were empty places at that table.
That alone would paint the picture, or at least the world picture, even more, and create more menace for Hook. I think there is definitely room for a Hook series, and would allow us to be able to create a new cast for it as well. Tell me Anya Taylor-Joy wouldn't make a great Tinkerbell.
Oh, right? Yeah. And then also imagine this. Imagine that Hook has one thing I loved about Hook, by the way, in his little private captain's quarters, was like all the cool, like little like wardrobes that he has in the bed that comes down. So how cool would it have been if like a part of his wall opens up and there he's got like trinkets that are uniquely identifying to the Lost Boys he was able to dispatch. So like instead of having the twins being here, their two Boy Scout hats are on the wall next to each other. And that's all. You don't even need to say that he did it. You just see that and you're like, oh, he got the twins. That'd be kind of dark. And then also then the Lost Boys would be maybe more, it would be interesting if like they might be more like cynical at the idea of Peter Pan's coming back. Oh, sure, Peter's back. Like, where were you before when we needed you? But then when they do realize, oh, it is Peter, then they'd be even more accepting and more joyful to have him. So I think it actually would have served them a lot more.
Yeah, because in just this movie with all those Lost Boys that are just kind of thrown at you, that's where the Eternals suffered, where you had like, oh, there was the fast one, and then there was the guy that fixes things, and then there was the really crabby one, and you didn't really have time to get to know each of them individually, as opposed to just kind of what they represent. Here, exactly the same thing. Before we get to our MVP, though, Twitter did speak out on this one here. Adrian Kennedy said, wait, did someone suggest that this is a bad movie? I will fight them.
You and me both.
And our good friend Brizzy chimed in with one of the best movies ever. Robin Williams is a god. So before we get to the MVP, though, I'm going to ask you, because he specifically singled out Robin Williams. Taking a look at the Robin Williams filmography, is this a top 5 Robin Williams film for you?
Okay, hold on. Let me pull him up. That's hard, man, because Robin Williams was one of those phenomenal actors where like, when you'd be like, hey, do you remember that he was in like, The Night of the Museum? You're like, damn, that's right. He was Teddy Roosevelt. Oh, that was such, you forget the ones that he was in. But if I'm going through it, at least in my head, I definitely know I like his more mature thing. So for sure, 1 Hour Photo's up there for me.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be up there. Death to Smoochie has to be up there.
Oh my God. Okay, hold the phone.
See, right there. You're like, wait, Death to Smoochie, right?
Hold the phone. When we started this podcast, and we haven't done it yet, Death to Smoochie was one of the films that I know it qualifies.
Does it?
It qualifies. Carrie and I freaking love this film.
Such a good movie.
So you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Death to Smoochie will have to be discussed on this show.
I can't wait. But I think, I'm really going through it, and like, other than maybe like his role as Genie in Aladdin, because I think that was like absolutely perfect as well.
Oh.
I think he did absolutely knock that one out of the park. Oh, but the Birdcage, but Deadpool. There's too many for me to just say he's in the top 5. But yes, I think if you really put a gun to my head, yes, this will be in the top 5. But if you actually ask me to go through and categorically rank every single film, it's for sure the top 10. It might be the top 5. God knows if I'm on the right day, this might even be in the top 3, even top 1. Because he has just such a stellar career. There's so much gold in his back category. And also so many little things, too, that he did. Like, do you guys remember his role in 9 Months?
Mm-hmm.
The obstetrician gynecologist who used to work with primates, so he keeps confusing monkey terms for human terms. Or even like little minor things, like his little role in To One Food Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, where he literally plays a character named John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. Amazing.
Oh, let's not forget his role as the King of the Moon in The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Yes. Let's not forget that. Or how about in Bicentennial Man, where he deals with the existential question of what is living, what is life, and like, can I identify as myself? You know, like when you're a robot trying to become a person. There's just so much in here, and it's all great. So, but yeah, I think gun to my head, this even falls in top. Hook falls in top 3. It has to. I think Hook could stand up there with the Dead Poets Society easily.
I'm surprised you didn't mention the final cut. I mean, me personally as an editor, I kind of, I love that film.
I am madly scrolling up and down his IMDb right now. So like, if Final Cut's on there, but just like,
Oh dear God! I feel like we now need to do like a grading on a curve of Robin Williams films. But
that'd be so hard. But I'm there.
Right? Okay. So no more hiding. Now it is time to name your MVP of Hook.
Okay. I've already said mine, but I have a subcategory, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So obviously my MVP is Dustin Hoffman, 1,000%. In any other film, they always say it's not the hero, it's the villain that makes the story. You know, there's a reason why the third James Bond film is called Goldfinger, because the villain has the interesting plot. It's just, James Bond and Goldfinger. But it doesn't happen all the way. However, I would like to propose to you a subcategory of MVP with the highest percentage in that one scene, though. So, like, yes, Dustin Hoffman steals all his scenes, but there's one specific scene where one character just absolutely steals it, and I think it's the funniest and best performance of the entire movie. And I'm going to surprise you, but it's Jack.
Really?
Jack has the best line in the entire movie, where it is before they go to Neverland, and Robin Williams is on the phone, and he's talking about, like, his deal's falling through. And Jack and Maggie are in the background playing, messing around, being annoying. And you pay attention to what they say, it's the best thing. Robin Williams says, the deal is falling apart because of an owl? Ask them if anyone misses the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And Jack in the background says, boy, do I ever. Wow, are you kidding? Yeah, that was awesome.
Okay. You said earlier that how can it not be Dustin Hoffman?
Yeah, but honestly, yeah, across the entire movie, it's Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman is not my MVP.
And I respect you, but understand that because of the physical distance between us, that's why I'm not driving over right now to fight you.
Okay, but I don't think I'm far off in having my MVP as Bob Hoskins, as Shmi.
Okay, that's like, I will accept that. If you had said like, well, there's a lot of people have acceptable, but Bob Hopkins is a good choice too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it, and it's interesting, of course, because, the movie is called Hook. And even though the majority of the movie, focuses on Peter and him trying to, reconnect to his, his never growing up child, it's still Hook's film very much in the same way that, Avengers Infinity War is Thanos' film. But when you think about it, most of the work done in the name of Thanos is done by Ebony Maw. So in this case,
you have a point there. You have a good point.
Yeah. Ebony Maw is the best character out of the Black Order in those films, the one that we kind of get to know the most. So when the Maw actually dies, it's like, oh crap, they got rid of him. Okay, so, and you're kind of happy to see him again in Endgame because of course they go back in time. Here, Shmi does so much of the legwork for Hook and humanizes Hook as well as helps connect and almost add to the gaslighting of Jack. Like, there's so much that Shmi does that makes Hook so good.
That's true. He is like the ultimate roadie. He supports the band, but he's not seen. But that's the perfect job of how you be a roadie. The perfect roadie is there. It makes the show happen, but doesn't actually steal the spotlight at all. And that's what he does.
Exactly. Greg, thank you so much. Before we go, please take a second and let us know all about Movie Date Night.
Well, so Lauren, my wife, and I, we had a podcast called Movie Date Night, Facebook, Twitter, all that, where we would change movies back and forth. We do still have tentative plans to go back and do it, but we're taking a baby hiatus right now. My son just turned 13 months, so it's been a while, but we do have plans to go back. Before we wrap up, though, I do want to bring up one thing that you and I kind of talked about before.
Oh, I completely forgot. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Bring this up.
There is this artist. I don't know how active they are anymore. I'll have to double check. But if you go into YouTube and you type in Pogo, Pugo, sounds like a pogo stick. There's this artist, and what he or she or they do is they take clips from a movie and they remix it into a really cool song using just the sound effects from the movie. So, for example, they've done like Alice in Wonderland, Cinderella. They kind of focus on Disney for a while. I think they kind of branched out eventually, but like I know they do like a Simpsons one, stuff like that. But one that they have that's perfect is called Bangarang. So if you do YouTube, Pogo, Bangarang, which is spelled Bangarang, it is this video of just it. I can't describe it. It's the coolest thing. And it starts off with the sound effects of Smee stomping on the deck to get the red carpet to come out, and the sound of the pie hitting Peter's face, and it just makes the best beat. It's the best song. Like, honestly, it's fantastic. And the thing is, like, that's from like 13 years ago. I've known about this for the longest time, and it's been on my phone in like the rotation of songs to randomly play as I'm driving since then. It's amazing.
I mean, I had to listen to it when you sent me the link, and it's interesting that the way they mixed it has almost a like more like an Enya type feel.
Kind of, yeah.
Where it's very ethereal, but
with a bigger beat though.
Yeah, exactly, right. So maybe it's more like an Enigma kind of thing. But the first thing that came to mind is that this is what Dragnet should have done.
Yes.
With City of Crime. That song during those credits. And if I remember correctly, they did a video for it. And it's annoying as hell.
Oh, I don't remember that, but I believe it.
Right? But this is fascinating. There was a video out there, and I can't believe I'm now in a Hook movie review show. I'm going to drop an MMA reference, but here we are. Bas Rutten, someone took one of his like home, self-defense course videos for bouncers and turned it into what's called Boss Beats. And you'll listen to it and you'll never get it out of your head. But being able to make a song out of just Foley and dialogue, that video is talent. Mm-hmm. It's absolute talent. And you have to sit there and really, I'd be curious too. Like if you strip out the dialogue and any of the harmonizing vocals that are in there as well, you mentioned ASMR, there's a lot of Foley in there that would probably trigger some of that for some people.
Oh, for sure.
Like, we'll put the link on the website for this episode. Definitely go have a listen to that song, once you're done listening to this full episode. Greg, again, thank you so much for this. To you, our listeners, you guys know the drills. If there's a movie out there that you think is unfairly maligned or is just so bad that there's no way in Neverland that we can find anything good to say about it, hit us up on Twitter at NotThatBadcast or go to our website at NotThatBadcast.com. While you're there, check out our Coming Soon page so you can see some of the movies that we are working on. Drop us a comment on any of those films or let us know on some of the movies that you do see us talking about. Until next time, Greg, thank you so much. Listeners, you guys are awesome. This is It's Not That Bad. Take care.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. we're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.